Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Skill Up Like a Superhero, the podcast that answers questions that you have about your career, about tech, and certifications. I'm your host, Dwayne Natwick, also known as Captain Hyperscaler, certified trainer for AKYLADE, Asaka, Microsoft, ISC2, CompTIA, and EC Council. And with 40 years, close to or over 40 years of experience in the IT industry. Today, we're going to be taking a look at taking steps to build a risk-aware and cyber-resilient organization. And with me today is Alyson Laderman and Jason Dion from AKYLADE, a cybersecurity certification provider that Captain Hyperscaler is proud to be a training partner. Alyson and Jason, why don't you both tell everyone a little bit about yourselves and a little bit about the journey of AKYLADE and journey to AKYLADE and your mission with AKYLADE. And I'll start with you, Alyson, because you have a very interesting story because unlike me and Jason, you don't necessarily come from tech.
That is true. Thanks for having us, Dwayne. My name's Alyson Laderman. I am the CEO of AKYLADE. And you're right. I don't come from a tech background, but have always had the tech interest. I'm kind of the user experience side. So my job is to come in, break things, and fix them. And so I actually come from the legal side with over 20 years of litigation and commercial experience in helping businesses grow and develop and thrive. And part of that process throughout those 20 years was a little bit on the tech side. So though I'm not the IT person, I worked very closely with our IT departments and really served as that conduit, especially in the larger firms, to communicate between the tech side and the legal side as to what we needed to do to protect our businesses. And so that kind of was always an interest of mine. I was part of creating the cybersecurity forces for these organizations and had that interest and passion. When I saw what Jason had started to develop with AKYLADE, I actually approached Jason and said, I love the concept. I love what you all are doing, but it looks like you need somebody to help kind of get this moving for you. And so I put myself out there as I'm the person to help you get this moving. And I wanted to very much be part of the process because I believed in that cybersecurity mission and the training and the education and really getting people the skills and knowledge they need to not only survive, but thrive in the atmosphere and make sure that we are protected. And so that's actually the short version of how I got from being a 20-year practicing lawyer to joining AKYLADE on their journey.
And I didn't mean to discount anything in terms of pointing out that you don't necessarily come directly from IT, but a lot of this journey does have to do with IT. But as we talk more, I think today it'll become apparent that it's not just IT that has the accountability and responsibility for risk awareness and cyber resilience. So your perspective on things, especially from the legal side, is something that I really admire about it all as well. And Jason, Alyson, I think teed you up pretty well around AKYLADE and where kind of the mission of AKYLADE came from. So kind of why don't you give a quick 50,000 foot of Jason Dion and AKYLADE.
Yeah, for those who don't know who I am Jason Dion. I am one of the founders of AKYLADE, and I'm the Chief Product Officer at AKYLADE now. I come from, similar to Dwayne, a very, very long storied history and journey in IT and ethical hacking and cybersecurity. I started professionally doing this back in 1995 when I was about 15 years old, and I've moved forward since then, continuing to work bigger and bigger jobs. I've worked for the National Security Agency. I've worked for U.S. Cyber Command as their global lead for cyber defense. I did a lot of incident response, did a lot of penetration testing, working with and around the government for the last 20 years. And then I started doing training similar to Dwayne, where I was teaching CompTIA, ITIL, and other certifications like that. And one of the big problems I found is that we can get a certification and then people would hire us, right? And not me doing because we've got years of experience, but let's say you're a brand new person trying to break into cybersecurity, right? Everybody goes, well, what do you need? You need a degree, you need certifications, you need experience. And usually the order they want that in is experience first, then certifications, then degrees, right? Degrees kind of establish pay band, certifications establish whether or not we're going to interview you for the job. But if you don't have experience, it's really, really hard to get that first job. And I see people who put in 100 or 500 or 1,000 resumes before they get that first job. And so what we did with AKYLADE was I started going around to all of my friends who are hiring managers and said, why aren't we hiring people who have certifications? How are we going to get people in when there is no true entry-level jobs? And we talk about entry-level jobs, right? You think about like somebody working at McDonald's. I could take any high schooler, and with a couple hours of training, they can start making burgers and fries and shakes and drinks and handing it out to the customers, and their value add pretty much from day one or day two. But if I look at a cybersecurity person, if you have zero experience, it may take me 3 to 6 months to upskill you. And corporate America is really wary of having to pay to bring somebody in and train them internally for 3 months, because most people are staying in their jobs 12 to 24 months now. So because we don't have loyalty to corporations, because corporations didn't have loyalty to us, and therefore we don't have loyalty to corporations, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, where in America now, if you're going to get hired for a job, they expect you to have the skills, have the experience, and have the certifications. Now, the big challenge that I see is, and you probably noticed this as well, because you're Captain Hyperscaler, you've done a lot of virtualization cloud computing over the years. The more we've done automation, the more we've done orchestration, and now with AI, the number of jobs to do a lot of the entry-level work, like network engineering, like system administration, like help desk, are now being taken over by these automated systems, which is great, except that if we've decreased the amount of jobs from 100% to, so let's say, even 50% being generous, that means there are half the amount of entry-level jobs to be feeder programs into cybersecurity. And so what we did with Accolade was we worked with all the hiring managers and said, if we built a certification that was hands-on, that was practical, that was skills-based, that actually measured that the person can do this job, would you be willing to hire these people and bring them in? Because now you know they can do the job, instead of just going, well, they've taken a Security Plus, they understand to speak about cybersecurity. And nothing wrong with Security Plus. I teach it myself. It's a great baseline certification. But if you get your Security Plus or your CISSP, it doesn't mean you can do a job. It just means you have the knowledge to answer A, B, C, D questions. And that's the approach we've taken differently with Accolade. We build all of our certifications first by talking with hiring managers to figure out what the needs are, what the skills are, and what the jobs are they need. Then we build a certification around that, and we make these all in a very, very hands-on environment so that you are being put in the role of somebody doing that job. For example, the CCRF and CCRP series, which is our cyber resilience, which I think is kind of what we're talking about today. When you go into the practitioner level, you're given a case study environment, and you're put in the shoes of, you are the cybersecurity consultant. What would you do, right? As we move into 2025, you're going to see a lot of our certifications are moving into a practical hands-on lab environment, where if you're being tested on being a SOC analyst, we're going to put you in front of a terminal for 2 hours, have bad things happening, and you have to identify, are these good? Are these bad? Are they malicious? Are they suspicious? Are they benign? And what would your recommendation be to fix those things? Just like you would if you were an entry-level SOC watchstander someplace in corporate America or at one of the managed service providers. So that's kind of, I probably went further than I need to, but that's kind of the idea of what we're trying to do at Accolade is we want to make it not just yet another cybersecurity certification, because I will tell you, there are over 1,800 certifications in cyber and IT right now. We don't need another certification. We need different certifications. We need a different way of testing.
No, and it's exactly one of the reasons why Captain Hyperscaler came to Accolade, was for the exact reason, because our approach is very similar. I was just talking to some customers yesterday about, we're not a commodity based, it's white glove. It's giving you transferable skills that can be used within your organization. And to kind of take that into kind of the topic today about risk awareness and cyber resilience, one of the things that I tend to see, and I'm going to ask this to you, Alyson, being being your background in handling things around cybersecurity especially within law firms and from the legal perspective, there seems to be this challenge or even hesitant to say a tug of war between the organization and the CISO and CIO departments within organizations around managing risk and what risk looks like and what controls need to be in place and things like that. So, Alyson, what are your thoughts on why that is, and what are some of the ways that maybe you've seen in the past, and then I'll ask you, Jason, as well, of how organizations can remedy those particular gaps?
So I think part of it is speaking the same language, right? So I actually wrote a little LinkedIn article on this of risk, but it's not all the same, right? Legal risk, financial risk, cyber risk. Yeah, it's the word risk, but it's not the same thing depending on what you're talking about. And so I think trying to approach it in a kind of 10th grade level, make sure we're all speaking the same language and be able to communicate what it is and why we need to care and what those numbers actually look like is going to make a huge difference, right? Generally speaking, not all lawyers, but can't do such a broad stroke. But generally speaking, the legal profession, by and large, is a little slow to adopt certain things of technology, right? It was only 10 years ago that we even did e-filing, right? Allowing electronic filing for stuff. And even to this day in Florida, not every jurisdiction does it the same. Like, we don't have the same programs. And so we see that challenge there where we don't necessarily understand all the technology. And so when somebody comes to us with a tech speak, they don't necessarily understand why they need to care. I kind of was an early adopter on this because I started earlier in my career. I had the opportunity to work for an international insurance company in-house. And that was the first time I had phishing training. And that was in 2007, 2008. So they were really kind of ahead of for law firm kind of type of thing, ahead of their game. And they made sure that we understood it. And so I was able to adapt to it. When you've got a lot of little law firms that aren't in that big network, right? They're not in that business mind. They're not trained to be business people. They're not trained automatically to think of these things that they really need to be considering as part of their business, because it is a business decision. And so unfortunately, sometimes it's too late when they've either been phished or hacked or everything's been ransomed, that they find out too late. And so there needs to be that communication. A lot of law firms don't necessarily have an IT department or a cyber team to work with, which are obviously two different things. They think just hiring somebody to come in and set up the windows, but not understanding all of the security parameters that need to be put in place and to make that a priority for the organization. That's where some of that problem, right, comes in. And I think there needs to be clear communication as to the expectation, who does what, so that they understand this part of IT does this, but maybe your security team does that. They might be two different things. It could be somebody who does both, but there needs to be an understanding that not necessarily the same person can cover all of the things that need to be done. So it is a part of the communication. And then part of it also in that communication is the financial piece, right? It's understanding that if bad things happen, and it's not even a matter of if, this is why we talk about cyber resilience, it's a matter of when. What is that going to look like for you? Are you going to have to shut down? Are you going to be able to get back online? Is your PII or your personal information going to be exposed of all of your clients? Is it medical records? Is it financial data? What is the likelihood you're going to get sued? And those are things the lawyers should be able to research now, right? Because there's case law showing that there are more and more class actions starting to come out saying, you're the protector, ethically speaking, as lawyers, we're the protector of your secrets. We have to keep your confidential information confidential. So if we're not taking the steps necessary to secure the data and the backup and all of the information, have we just ethically exposed, knowingly or unknowingly, your confidential information? Is that a violation? And that same kind of concern really should apply to other businesses. But as businesses sit down and they're trying to prioritize, where can I spend my money? Cyber isn't the first thing they're thinking about. And yet nowadays it really needs to be a big part of it is, okay, it's not just up and running, but how to stay up and running. Because an incident, as they're targeting more and more smaller organizations, not only takes you offline, it could cost you your business. Never mind reputation, finances, and everything else, but it could be end game for you. So a lot of that is that communication, bringing it down to where everybody's speaking that same language, looking at the numbers and giving it that holistic picture, and really trying to get people to that table to have that conversation in the first place.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that when I'm teaching any of my cybersecurity classes, including the AKYLADE courses, is I always say, it starts at the top and getting the advocacy out of the C-level, the executives, the board. And our challenge as the cybersecurity practitioners is building the business case that aligns with the business mission, so that they advocate, and then there's the responsibility throughout the organization to execute it. And Jason, kind of anything that you want to add to that particular question from your perspective as well?
Yeah, so Ali covered a lot of information, and so I think she did a really good job there. I'll bring it from a different perspective, and that's somebody who was technical and was a leader in the technical field, and what I had to do to get funding and resources, because we all know there's only so much funding and resources available. I served as an IT director several times. I was a deputy CIO as well. for a very, very large organization with tens of thousands of endpoints. My largest organization I worked at was 1 million endpoints, so very, very large organizations across multiple countries and multiple continents even. The biggest challenge that we have is we have to speak in the language of risk because that's what they understand. And I will say the biggest challenge I always had as an IT director or a deputy CIO was convincing the CEO, the COO, and the CFO that what I was doing was important and we needed money, because to them, it was a cost center. And that's the way they viewed IT for a long time. That's the way they viewed cyber defense and cybersecurity for a long time. Now, I will say those who are operating in this field nowadays in the last 24 months or so, 24 to 36 months, are probably having an easier time getting money because we all see the effects of this now. I mean, if you just go back a couple of months ago, there were doctors' offices closing down because they weren't getting paid because the insurance provider had gotten a ransomware attack and literally had no way to continue to operate and accept and process claims because everything was done digitally. And when that system shut down, it took them 5 weeks to get back online. There was another one where the insurance providers, the same company, this Choice or Chance, I think it was, which is the underlying processor for all these medical services, they because they were down, Walgreens and CVS couldn't process patients' prescriptions because they couldn't check if their insurance was valid and get payment. There's a whole bunch of stuff that happens and they can't figure it out. Hospital systems are getting ransomware as well, where a hospital system will be, their patient devices are being taken over, right? And they have to figure out, how do we take these things offline and continue to operate with pen and paper in the way we used to do it? I have a friend who works disaster recovery and incident response and how they do their business continuity for a large hospital system. And that's the challenge that she has to express all the time to her bosses is, look, we need to figure out a way that if the computers go down, we can continue to operate. And that's what cyber resilience is more about instead of cyber security. Cybersecurity, and I'm going to show my age here, but I've been doing this since 1995. We used to call it information security. Then it became information assurance. Then it became cybersecurity. And now we start talking about cyber resilience because we realized we can't have this Fort Knox type of approach where we're protecting everything everywhere all at once because it doesn't work. You have to prioritize things. And so with cyber resilience, we're going, okay, what are the most important systems? If these systems go down, how can I continue to operate? Can I do this? And that continue to operate may be a pen and paper method. That's okay. I mean, I've seen grocery stores where I've gone in and literally I go to check out. They go, sorry, we're closed for the next 2 hours because our systems are down. I'm like, well, can't you just ring me up with, pen and paper and I'm paying cash? Nope. I can't even take cash at this point because there's no way to do it, right? We need backup systems in place to be able to continue to operate our businesses, even when bad things happen, because as Alyson said, it's not a question of if, it's a matter of when, and when is you're going to be attacked someday, somehow, because there's infinite ways to attack you, but only so many ways we can defend ourselves.
Yeah, you brought up a couple of key points there. The aspect of those critical systems, and I had a similar situation. I went into a store and they used my credit card and they used the old carbon swipes. they actually still had them under the table, so they had a level of business continuity in place, right? They had a process in place. Let's go back to old school carbons, but. You brought up that term, the term cyber resilience and the criticality, and really a way that kind of we have evolved, and accelerated into digital technology and cloud technology. And one of the things that in my previous position before I went out and started Captain Hyperscaler was I was a cloud security lead for a global organization, global managed security service provider, and we had an organization of hundreds and hundreds of CISSPs and CSIMs and Security Plus people that could architect security in a data center all day long. But when you started talking to them about cloud security and how to protect data, in that much broader aspect of things, they had a challenge, and that's really what my role was to teach them how to address those challenges for customers. And the point that you made there, and the point both of you actually made, was the communication and the building that level of understanding, whether you're a service provider that's providing consulting services to an organization, or you're a CIO, CSO that's trying, CISO that's trying to talk to the CFO, just to use alphabet soup here, the CRO, all of those people, all these C-level people trying to get into a room and talk a singular language. I think that singular language is really where we have kind of evolved into that term of cyber resilience. Really, is that we're talking that language of what does our business need to survive if we are under some sort of physical or digital type of attack. And
well, I think the other thing you have to remember is it's not about protecting ourselves from everything anymore either, right? And
right.
That's the point. And so we, as the C-suite, right, as the executive officer, the operations officer, the risk officer, the security officer, the financial officer, we need to make a holistic business decision. And in the old days, if you go back to the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, we just said, oh, that's an IT problem. Let the CIO deal with that, right? And it was so different from the rest of the business that the people on the business side weren't thinking about it. And so we started having things like, hey, a server went down and we need to reboot it in the middle of the day. Well, if we do that, we just kicked off all of the employees doing work for the rest of the day. So why aren't we going to talk to the business and say, when would be the best time for us to implement that security patch, right? Because maybe it's at midnight tonight when everybody's at home. That's probably the right answer, right? Instead of 3 PM, everybody's trying to work. But these are the things we have to think about. And when we look at this as a cyber person, right? If you're a cyber person or an IT person, your job is to identify the risks, prioritize those risks, and then make a recommendation to the leadership on the business side, and they should be involved in this. He'll say, yes, while we think that being more secure is valuable, we know that if we increase our security to this level, our sales are going to drop by 10% because there's more friction in the checkout process, for instance, right? And so you make these business decisions, goes, well, you know what, we're going to make it less secure so we can make more money. And that's okay, as long as you're making that as a valid business decision and the people know what the risk is that they are accepting. Because not everything needs to be 100% secure, because I always talk about this with my Security Plus students. When you look at a system, you have operations and security, and the more operations you have, the less security you have. The more security you have, the less operations you have, right? Because they're inverse to each other. I can make it the most secure system in the world, but it's not connected to the internet. Nobody can touch it, and it's locked up in a vault. Is it doing any valid business use case? No, but it's the most secure system in the world, right? And so these are the things you have to think about from a business perspective.
Yeah.
Can I add to that? Yeah. So
yes.
I agree. And that's where you get the business kind of buy-in. Like Jason said, you really need to have the C-suite and the CFO and the people making financial decisions to go through and look at those parameters and recommendations, because like Jason said, not every risk needs to have certain actions. Maybe you accept that particular risk. So for example, going back to legal stuff, there was a typical type of car built that they knew when it had the turn signal on and got rear-ended, it would implode into flames. And the company knew. And they actively chose not to fix that problem because they knew it was cheaper to pay for the few times that it might happen than to redo the entire car line. And that's that same.
I remember that car.
Right? I'm old enough to know that car as well, sadly.
Hey, I'm in Detroit. It was built here.
Yeah.
Fair
and
enough.
for those who are wondering what this is, just look up 1970s exploding car. You'll figure it out pretty quickly.
Anyway, but yes, I mean that. But that's a very real scenario and a way to explain it to businesses to understand. Right? They make those choices every day as to which risks are we willing to take and which ones aren't. And the same thing happens in the cyber sphere, right? So we're looking at what are, like Jason said, sometimes there's too much security and now nobody can work, and that doesn't work either, right? So they have to sit down and understand the dollars and cents in a real, I love seeing the comments on the side, but a dollars and cents in a real world scenario so they can make those business decisions. And once they make those decisions with their team, with their cyber team and with their IT team, they now have that buy-in, I think, and that understanding. Because once somebody makes that, legally, psychologically speaking, once they're part of that decision-making process, they can then take ownership of that decision and then help make that flow through the rest of the organization. Because like you said, Dwayne, it's got to come from the top all the way down to really get that buy-in. And I get it. Sometimes it's a challenge. Some people at the top just don't understand all of it. And so you might have to pull on the help of other players and other members of the C-suite to really break it down into whatever language it takes for them to get it to be able to make those educated decisions on cyber resilience for the company. So.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, and it is, like you said, it's that communication. That's something I talk about constantly, is having the proper acumen to speak, not just technical. The technical people need to speak business, and the business people need to understand a little bit around what the impact is going to be to their business. And so to kind of pivot a little bit and kind of take that into the value of training and learning, and kind of going back to what you were saying, Jason, at the beginning of the introductions around certifications, and there's an 1,800 cybersecurity certifications out there. I'll probably challenge you, there's probably more than that.
Yeah, it's actually an old number, but that's the number I used to go with, because when I started teaching 10, 15 years ago, that was the number, but I know there's even more now.
Yeah, 10, 15 years ago. Come on, that was dinosaur ages ago. I have a friend of mine who says that's the pre-Jurassic era.
Yeah.
That long ago. So when it comes to technology, but there's different views and different things that obviously social media has its positives and negatives, and generally people don't hesitate to give their opinion on social media. And being somebody that trains and makes a living training people, there's different views that kind of will trigger me and kind of get under my skin about training and certifications. And one of the things that I said at the beginning was, around Accolade and around the approach, the workshop type of approach of the training programs that you're developing, and how Captain Hyperscaler can deliver them. How do you think that your approach and really the go-to-market of Accolade in terms of your certifications can kind of adjust those opinions of all of the asynchronous learning and quick YouTube videos and everything like that everybody's offering for free or for a very small amount? How does Accolade look at that and your approach when developing a new certification?
Yeah, so as you know, I come from the training background as well. I used to have a company called Dion Training. I sold that last year when I moved over to Accolade and started the Accolade brand. And I can teach anybody in 40 hours how to pass a Security Plus, right? And so can you, Dwayne, right? I can put somebody in a classroom Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 every day, give them a break for lunch, give them potty breaks, whatever, and off they go. My Security Plus course, I have an asynchronous version of it. It's 30 something hours. If you go through and watch all the videos and take my practice exams, you will pass your Security Plus. Now, can you do the job? No, right? Because Security Plus doesn't teach you how to do a job. It teaches you theory, it teaches you knowledge. And so what you do, and I know you do this a lot, Captain Hyperscaler, is you put practical hands-on things into your training, right? So if we're talking about an SQL injection, we might boot up a VM and show you how to do an SQL injection, right? That's more like what you really need for the real world. The problem is when you get a standard certification like a Security Plus or whatever, they're all ABCD tests. So it's really knowledge-based. And the questions are written in a very low knowledge assessment type level, as opposed to putting you in the shoes of doing some kind of job function. So what we have done with Accolade is we have made the tests to test to the ability to do the job function. And that's a big difference between what you're seeing in a lot of the current certifications out there. Now, the reason why this is important is, could you have a great instructor like Dwayne who teaches you hands-on how to do a bunch of stuff as well as how to pass the exam if you're taking a Security Plus? Yes. But the problem is not every trainer is like Dwayne, and not everybody has the amount of time. If I'm teaching a 2-week Security Plus course, I've got time to give you a whole bunch of labs and hands-on stuff. But if I'm doing a 30-hour or 40-hour course, I don't. I'm just going to basically give you knowledge from a book, right? I'm going to help you pass an exam. And because the way the Security Plus exam is written, either way will get you to pass the exam. But with an Accolade certification, if you don't know how to do the job, you will not pass the exam. And that's important because hiring managers need to know that this certification matters because it means somebody can do the job. Now, I'm going to give you a quick example here. I speak with lots and lots of hiring managers as we figure out what we're doing. And one of the ones, and I think this is probably where your question came from, is, online, a lot of students are like, well, certifications are useless because if I get a certification, I can't get a job. Nobody will hire me, right? I talked to the hiring managers and some of them are saying certifications are useless because when I hire somebody with the certification, they can't do the job. And so both sides are very upset with this because you're paying a lot of time and a lot of money to get these certifications, and it's not doing what you as a candidate think it is, which is getting you a job. And it's not doing what the hiring manager thinks that it's doing, which is getting them a qualified candidate. Now, why, if that's the case, do hiring managers still ask for things like Security Plus and other certifications? Because it's the best they've got, to be quite honest, right? If I'm hiring for a job, and I have a very small training company, when I was hiring for a job, I would get 800 to 1,000 applicants per position. And we're a small company with 40 people, right? I can only imagine what BlackBerry and Microsoft and Google and those folks are getting for each of their jobs. And the reason is it's so easy for us to apply for jobs now on LinkedIn by just hitting apply now. But somebody on the other end has to look at those applications and decide who gets interviewed. Well, what's one of the fastest ways to go from 1,000 people to, let's say, 100 people? Simply saying, I need XYZ certification. And so if it says, Security Plus recommended or required, and you don't have Security Plus on your resume, you're not going to get looked at. And so that's why it's important for a candidate. Does getting a Security Plus mean you're going to, get hired? No, but it means you're at least getting your resume into the consideration pile out of those 1,000 down to the 100 or whatever, right? And so what the purpose of certifications is to show you have a baseline level of knowledge. And ideally, what a certification really should be doing is saying, you can do this job role. And that's what we've kind of switched to in this mindset. And that's why we're making really good progress with what we're doing here at Accolade. And our goal, to be quite honest, is to get the rest of the industry to mimic us and do what we're doing and start becoming skills-based certification and training. Because as we have less people coming in at those entry-level IT jobs, we are going to have a way for people to go directly into an entry-level cybersecurity job by using a certification, a test, a hands-on environment, something. Because if everybody is just hiring the people who have 2 years of experience doing IT, we're going to run out of people, and we already have. And that's why we've been talking about the cybersecurity skills gap since 2019, and by 2023, we're going to have 3.5 million jobs that are empty because of it, and blah, blah, blah. And we still have this gap. And it's not a gap of skills. We have plenty of people who have the skills, but they have no way to validate and show they have those skills to an employer at scale without getting a job and working a year or two. And if there's not enough jobs to get, then we have this glut where there's not enough people coming into the pipeline. And that's what we're trying to solve for.
No, excellent. Alyson, do you have anything to add? Are you good?
I'll say Jason covered pretty much all of it. I mean,
I think you did.
That's what we're looking for. I mean, we are building those skills things because it is a validation of you can do the job when you get there. Because I can sit and watch all the LinkedIn learning courses I want, but I will never understand and be able to apply the material in the way that you and Jason could.
Yeah, and that's the same conversation that I have when I'm talking to customers, and again, why Captain Hyperscaler came to Accolade to be a training partner was because of that approach. There's a very strong alignment in what we want to do as a training organization and what Accolade's building. I've been involved in, and I've built helped as an SME build some of the applied skills labs that Microsoft's putting that's doing kind of a similar thing in terms of that skill-based approach that enhances the paper certification that you get for passing a test, and I really believe in those, doing things like, hackathons and those skills-based trainings. And it's, one of the things that's kind of hard, especially when you're teaching, like when you're doing risk management, AI security, cyber resilience, it's a theoretical approach, but there's still an application to it, and that's one of the things, you need to have a level of analytical thinking and cognitive analysis to it around that. And so those are things that we need to understand. And Alyson, around that and around those discussions, what one of the things to discuss is we've got these different perspectives and discussions around what is the different types of training, how people learn, and the differences really between going through a training, getting a training certificate, or getting a certification. So what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Well, there's a couple things. So there is an absolute difference between having the training, getting a certificate, and a certification. And I know Jason can expand on this quite a bit more as well. It's nice to go through, nice to go through the training, right? But without a certification that is accredited to validate and follow those scientifically valid and make sure that it's statistically valid certification questions, you're not really getting a certification, right? Most of the times you'll go through a course and you get a certificate saying, I sat through and watched 4 hours of training, right? But it doesn't mean you were engaged. It doesn't mean you weren't doing it, not listening, driving in your car. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all listen to podcasts and other ways to enhance our current knowledge, right? But whether or not you can apply it, that's where a certification comes at the end. And not all certifications are built the same. So we're going through the accreditation process under the ISO 17024 standards right now. We know that Microsoft, for some of theirs, doesn't actually do the accreditation process. And so people say, well, what is accreditation and why does that matter? Accreditation really is that process that, excuse me, it is multiple steps and checks along the way to make sure that we're not making useless garbage. Let's put it that way, right? So that there is a validating body that comes in and looks to make sure that you are fulfilling each of the steps along the way. So what do we do at Accolade, for example, is we start off, and this goes back to what Jason was saying a moment ago, we start with a job task analysis. What is the job that you should be able to do when you demonstrate these skills, right? We want to align skills with a particular job. So we start with, what's the job? What do we think you should do? And we bring in subject matter experts from the field, people from large organizations, from the government, from education. We cover all the different spheres and types of experience. And they provide their knowledge to say, okay, if somebody comes in for this job, whatever job is, they should do these skills. Then after that process, they go through and they do a survey to say, well, how important are the skills? Are these things we use daily, weekly, quarterly, monthly, annually? Not at all. Is it absolutely critical to the job? Is it nice to have? Is it a need to have? And so we evaluate how often and how important each of the skills are. We then take those skills through that measuring system and create the blueprint for the exam. Once that blueprint is created, then we bring back the subject matter experts and usually other ones where we go through and make sure that they have the experience necessary to be part of this process. And they help write and edit and provide feedback on the exam questions themselves. And they have a few weeks of a process to go through that. Once you go through the writing and the editing process, then we work with a psychometrician who comes in and looks at the questions, and they do a deep dive analysis of what is the level of the individual that should be able to pass this exam if they actually had the job. Like, what is that baseline? And they help us determine that cut score. And they also go through and look at the validity of the questions, right? Like, is it confusing? Or does the answer give away, does the question give away the answer? Is it too easy? Is it too hard? Let's make sure this is exactly testing what it's meant to be testing. Once we go through that, we do a beta exam process where we release it to the public, where other people come in and everybody can take it. And then we really get that feedback in real time as to, did the exam set out to accomplish what we wanted it to do? And we look at those results again with the psychometrician, make sure it's statistically valid. And then we finally go through, make any final edits, bring in more subject matter experts as needed to go ahead and make any adjustments, and then release it to the public. So it is a long, very detailed process to make sure that it's not just a bunch of people hanging out in a room like me, Jason, and Dwayne going, let's make a cert today, guys, and writing up some questions. It's not that easy.
Well, I think that's
certainly
a really good point, right? So you talk about the difference between training and certificates and certifications, right? The way we do this is a certification. And one of the examples I bring up on this is when we talk about ethical hacking, right? So there are 3 main ethical hacking certifications that most people will hear of and go for, right? And I'm sure Dwayne's going to nod along as I say these, right? CEH, Certified Ethical Hacker from EC Council, Pentest Plus from CompTIA, and OSCP from Offensive Security. Okay, if you look at CEH, it was originally a 100% ABCD test. Now they have the CEH practical. They've added on to that, but it's an optional practical. So you could still become a CEH just by doing an ABCD test. Not as in depth, right? But they've been around since 2000. They're well known. It's asked for by a lot of employers. And even the DoD has it as one of the things for their contract requirements is CEH fulfills a lot of those requirements. Back in 2018, CompTIA came out with Pentest Plus, which basically took what CEH was doing and then added to it. It goes a little bit harder, a little bit more in depth, but in addition to that, they have 3 to 5 hands-on, practical-based, I would call them simulations. They're not full labs, right? And so they're very minor. As a PDQ, if you've ever taken a CompTIA exam, you know what I'm talking about. And then you have OSCP, which OSCP is a full 24 to 48 hour exam, remote proctored as you're doing it. You're going into an environment, you're hacking boxes, you're finding codes, you're writing up a report, and then you're submitting it after. That is the most like doing an ethical hacker's job. You're going to go, you're going to hack, you're going to write a report, and you're going to get graded on it. I think that is the most realistic and best exam, and what most certification exams should be in the future. Now, the challenge is they have never gone through and gotten ISO certified. So when I was hiring for the DoD, I couldn't hire based on an OSCP. I couldn't require my contractors when I was hiring somebody having that as part of their job description because it wasn't aligned to the DoD 8140 list, which says these are the certifications you need for these roles, and they have to be ISO compliant. So that's the thing that AKYLADE is doing a little bit differently when we talk about certifications is we are making these hands-on certifications like OSCP, but in a hands-on practical environment that still meets all these requirements to be able to be added to the 8140 list. And when we talk about certifications, to be a true certification, you cannot be the company that also provides the training for it. To be a true certification, you can't just build it with the experts inside of your organization. You need to bring in outside industry experts. And the reason I bring this up is you're going to see that 1,800 number I gave earlier, you're right, it's probably closer to 2,500 at this point, but everyone and their brother seems to be making a, quote, certification these days. And there are a lot of hands-on certifications that they're calling them, but they're not really certifications. They're certificates of completion, because the only way to take their exam is to go through their course. And the only person who wrote their exam was the 3 or 4 instructors who worked for that company. So if Dwayne wanted to create Captain Hyperscaler certifications and go through a training and then give you an end of course exam and then give you a certificate and call it a certification, there's nothing that stops him from doing that. But no employer out there is going to recognize that as a valid certification. And the DoD, the Department of Defense, which still is 50 to 70% of jobs are tied some way back to the DoD in cybersecurity. You're never going to be on those lists. You'll never be able to meet those requirements using a Captain Hyperscaler certificate. That's why you need a certification at the end that actually aligns. And so those are kind of the difference when you talk about training, certificates, and certifications. Training is awesome. You need training. Certificates are great. It shows you completed a course and you get your CEU credits for it for CISSP and PMP and all the others that you need it for. But really a certification takes it to that next step where it is statistically valid, it's equal, and everyone has an equal opportunity. Everyone's getting graded the same way. Everyone is being tested the same way. Every question is analyzed to the nth degree to make sure it is unbiased, relevant, and industry accepted, and not just, well, this is how we do it at my company, but this is how the industry does it. No matter what company you're at, this is how it's going to be.
No, really, really good points. And yeah, and just this disclaimer, if you get a certificate from Captain Hyperscaler, it is titled a certificate of completion, not a certification. So, and generally you will get a certificate of completion from me if you take one of my trainings, then
because you do that to be able to clear your CEUs,
because you spent that time. You spent that
Exactly.
time, and it does show a level like Alyson said. Yeah, some people will take a training and they'll be they won't be engaged that whole 8, 12, 40 hours, but like I said, that certification shows at least that they've made some sort of commitment to taking that test, like you said, that gets you to that next step, hopefully in that resume, that then you can prove it. And like you said, AKYLADE gives you a level of understanding, and when we go through the training, the scenario based level of workshopping through putting yourself in that position to go through that process is going to be is validated through that exam, through the AKYLADE exam, that you've done your due diligence, and then you can prove that to your to a prospective employer. So
that's why I say, I'll give you an example of this difference of training, certificate, and certification as well. About 10 years ago, I was hiring for a position, and we said, hey, this position was tied to a government contract, must have CISSP, right? So he said, okay. That's on the job posting. I tell HR, go find me some people. They went out, they got applications. There's about 800 people applied for the job. HR went through and filtered them by basically doing a control F. And if the word CISSP was on there, it made it to my desk as the hiring manager. Well, out of the 800, 83 of them had the word CISSP on there. Now, the problem is HR doesn't know what CISSP is or what the difference is between going to a course, getting a certificate, and getting a certification. But our contract requirement was we had to have somebody who had a CISSP, which means they had to have passed the test. Out of those 83, how many people do you think had a CISSP?
I'd say less than a dozen.
3 candidates had
even lower.
So those are the 3 that got interviewed. The other 80, they had things on there like attended a CISSP boot camp, completed my CISSP training on this date. Well, the problem is I'm okay if you completed your training, because we could have hired somebody and then they could have gotten the certification within 3 months under the terms of the contract. But if they didn't, we had to fire them. So I really was trying to get somebody who already had their CISSP, because you and I both know passing rate on CISSP is like 20 to 25%. It's a really hard certification to pass.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've just had bad luck with hiring people with the intent of them getting it. And so I'm like, you got to have it if my contract requires it. So we interviewed these 3 people and we picked one, but out of the other 80, it was all like, we had one that's like, I took a class, and the time they took a class was 3 years ago. I had one person who listed they took the class twice and they still hadn't passed the exam. So I'm guessing if you took it, a year ago and 2 years ago and you still aren't certified today, that means you're going to have a hard time passing that test, right? So why am I going to hire you in hopes you're going to get it, right? And so that's the difference with a certification, is knowing that person has completed it and they have been validated as having those skills. Whereas anybody can sit through a class and get their certificate at the end. It doesn't mean they actually learned anything. The certification proves that you actually learned it and can apply it.
Yep. Yeah. And to kind of wrap things up here, because we're closing in on 45, or we've been chatting now for 45 plus minutes. The aspect of these trainings and everything like that, and the value that AKYLADE's bringing, like I said, I do training for pretty much, for most of the organizations that have been brought up today. We've mentioned CISSP. I do ISC2 trainings. I do ASACA trainings, and I'm accredited. We talked about the accreditation. ASACA, to be a trainer, it is the most detailed process that I've ever been involved in to become a trainer for ASACA. I have to go. They do that all third party. I had to do interviews with subject matter experts to prove that I know the content before I can teach those courses. And that whole, and on the back end with the JTAs and all that, I've been involved with other organizations as well as with AKYLADE on that analysis. And those are all great ways to, again, not be just Jason Dion sitting in a room saying, oh, I'm going to do a certification on this. There's a lot of value to that, and the independent verification through ISO or APMG or ANSI or whoever you're using. Gives a lot of value, and that's something that I look for in a lot of cases in who I'm going to market with, and that's why I really love the AKYLADE courses. I've taught the CSF and the CSP already, and something to let everybody know. Go to LinkedIn on LinkedIn and follow Captain Hyperscaler. We're doing some little 90 to 120 minute trainings every Friday. I'll be doing these little snippets around cyber resilience and and risk management and AI security to kind of hopefully whet your appetite for the actual training classes, which I'll be offering as well in October and November. AKYLADE has some great beta exams around risk management foundations and risk management practitioner that's available now at a very special price. And I'll be doing training in line with those beta exams before those beta exams are complete, as well as the AI security foundations, which I believe October 1st that goes into beta, and I'll be doing a training on that the second week of October if you want to prepare for that exam. So I'll let you both, Alyson or Jason, if you want to give a quick overview of the risk management as well as the AI security. That'd be great. We talked a lot, the cyber resilience and everything we talked about today around cyber resilience, you'll learn in those cyber resilience courses. But if you want to give a quick rundown, just a quick elevator pitch of those two, that'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. So as you mentioned, we talked about cyber resilience, and for cyber resilience, that is the first 2 certifications we have. There's a fundamentals level, which is the Certified Cyber Resilience Fundamentals, and there's a practitioner level of Certified Cyber Resilience Practitioner. And all of our certifications have a fundamentals or foundation level and then a practitioner level. The foundation or fundamentals is more the knowledge-based exam to make sure you can speak the language. The practitioner is, can you do the job, right? And so it's being part of the team versus leading the team. When we talk about the cyber resilience, that one is really focused on the NIST Cybersecurity Framework version 2.0 and how to implement that in an organization. When we go into risk management, yes, we cover the NIST RMF, the risk management framework, but that is really only heavily used on the DoD and government side. It's not really used out in the civilian world. So the other domains of that are really covering all of the other cyber risk stuff you should be thinking about and how to implement this in the real world from the other risk management frameworks as well. We talk about qualitative and quantitative risk analysis and how to perform those. We talk about looking at a vulnerability and deciding how that vulnerability stacks up as far as a prioritization of risk. We talk about soft skills and how to communicate risk to shareholders and stakeholders, because that's a really important part of it as well. Then you move into our next series, which is the AI security series, and that is based on the NIST AI RMF, or risk management framework. This one, very similar to how the NIST CSF is done, of how you're going to think about the governance and implementation of cyber resilience throughout your organization. This one is understanding how do we apply AI. Now, the big difference here is I'm seeing a lot of AI certifications popping up that are all based on operations. It's prompt engineering and how do you configure a data set and how do you do this or that. That's not what you're going to learn in our course or our certification and in Captain Hyperscaler's course. Instead, you're going to learn how to think about this as a risk management decision. How are we going to implement AI? And when AI is being added, what risks are we taking? And are those risks ones we're willing to accept? What protections can we put in place? How are these things all going to integrate from this cyber resilience risk management perspective and using that inside the world of AI? Because over the last 18 months or so, or almost 24 months since ChatGPT came out, everyone seems to have to throw AI in every product. If you're using Microsoft Word, there's Copilot. If you're using GitHub, there's Copilot. If you're using, we use Asana and ClickUp, there's AI embedded into that. And a lot of times you didn't even ask for these AI tools, but they're being thrown into your organization's tools. And if you don't understand what data is going in or out of those tools, you can really have some problems. I always use the example of ChatGPT. Even if your organization is not buying ChatGPT for your people, I bet you there are people in your organization using ChatGPT. And the problem is, if they're using it on the public version that you pay the $20 per month for, the free version, all of your corporate data that they're asking questions about inside of ChatGPT is now feeding their model. So if you're a lawyer like Alyson was, and you say, oh, here's the facts of my client's case, let me throw it in ChatGPT to write up a summary. Well, you just disclosed all your private, confidential, lawyer-protected information into the main ChatGPT database. Now, are there ways to protect against that? Sure. You could buy the enterprise account. And we use ChatGPT at AKYLADE all the time, but we have an enterprise account where it is not training on our data. And our data stays in its own white labeled solution that only we have access to, and nobody else gets access to our chatbots or the data we put into those chatbots. And so these are the kind of things you have to think about as an enterprise in AI. And that's why we built out this AI security at the foundation and practitioner level. So if you're a consultant going in to help an organization, how do you use AI? When should you use AI? Where we should be using AI? All of that is covered in that certification.
No, thank you for sharing that. And that's something I joke that I talk at a lot of webinars and put in a lot of sessions for different cybersecurity events. And the joke that I always say is that if you don't put AI in your abstract or in your title, you're not going to get accepted to that event.
Yep.
because everybody wants to talk about it.
We went to a test creator event last March. Ali and I were there presenting with our psychometrician on a topic, and literally I think we were 1 or 2 out of the 20 presentations that day, and we were one of the 1 or 2 that did not talk about AI. Right. The other 20 presentations, everything was AI, but it was all AI from here's how you use it to write questions, and here's how you use it for this. I'm like, you guys are not even thinking about the security aspect, because let's say you're writing questions for a certification exam. If you're using OpenAI or ChatGPT with OpenAI stuff in the public thing, your questions are now part of their database. So if somebody goes in later and says, give me 5 practice exam questions for Security Plus, and you use that to write Security Plus questions, well, guess what? You may get real questions as practice now, and that invalidates the exam. So all of these things are things that we're like, whoa, hold on, guys. You got to think about the security side and the governance side. And they're like, no, we just want to think about the operations side and how we can, eliminate 10 jobs this year out of the 100 people we have on our staff and things like that. And I'm like, no, slow down. Anyway, that's my
I talk a lot about how working with AI is another data engineering handling approach. You need to think about how you're handling your data, just like you do for any app that's presenting data, but at a much larger scale because of how it farms that information. So
I think it's also important for them to think about, when I'm going to use AI, do I need to use AI for that? I've seen people using AI to do things like reformat this data into CSV, and I'm like, you can use automation for that. That's a couple lines of Python script. And it will cost you pennies to run that Python script. where it's costing you dollars to run that AI. And so a lot of people are just throwing AI at every problem, because if you don't have AI on your sheet, investors won't, it's not your K1, you're not going to get investment on Wall Street. It's not your venture capital, slide deck, you're not going to get invested in. Everybody wants AI. It's basically the crypto craze of 5 years ago and the
Right.
VR craze of 10 years ago, right? AI is now the big thing. And so a lot of times AI is a solution looking for a place to go, as opposed to we built AI to answer the problem. And so, that's one thing I just tell your audiences, if you're in the decision making, think about, do I need AI for this? Because the answer most of the time is no. We're seeing so many use cases of AI that don't need AI.
Mm-hmm. And I think we've just come up with our next episode of Skill Up Like a Superhero, because we could probably go another hour here on this particular topic. But
I'm happy to come back and talk AI anytime you want.
And I'm going to hit you up on that. But I want to thank you both. Just to kind of summarize that again. Reach out to AKYLADE, reach out to Captain Hyperscaler, myself. We're all available on the social media platforms. As Jason said, the foundational or fundamentals courses are good for everybody. They aren't highly technical courses. They're getting to that level that Alyson was speaking of speaking the same language. And so looking at those courses within AKYLADE that I offer within Captain Hyperscaler is a benefit for everybody. The practitioner is more applying those skills and what you learn. So there's really two levels of learning and certification that you can definitely go in, and we're happy to help you make that a goal of yours, help you, as we say at Captain Hyperscaler, build your origin story and then take that to your hero saga as you skill up like a superhero. So I want to thank Alyson and Jason. Thank you both for your time today, and we'll bring an end to this episode. But like I said, I'll have you back again. We'll definitely talk some AI security. We'll probably schedule this here maybe as we're coming out of the beta of the AI security certification. Would probably be really good to kind of talk a little bit more about that one and the approach that it has, because like you said, there's a lot of different AI security, and it has a lot to do with, like you said, prompt engineering and automation and how you build apps around it and bots and all of those things, rather than how do you really look at the data and the risk that you have. So until that time, make sure you're subscribing on our website, on our YouTube channel, and everything. And until next time, always be